A Werewolf Shifter Romance by Lena, from Lena's Romance Library. Chapter 1. The Storm's Gift. The blizzard came without warning, swallowing the mountain highway in a wall of white that made Lily's ancient Honda shake like a leaf. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles bone white against the cracked leather as the headlights barely cut through the swirling chaos ahead. "Come on, please," she whispered to the car, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "Just get me to the next town." But the universe had other plans. The engine sputtered once, twice, then died completely. The heater went silent, and within seconds the cold began seeping through the windows like hungry fingers. Lily sat in the sudden quiet, her breath already forming small clouds in the rapidly cooling air. 3 days ago, she'd been living in her ex-fiancé's penthouse in Seattle, planning a wedding that would never happen. Now she was stranded on a mountain road in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but a suitcase of belongings and a bank account that wouldn't last another month. "At least Marcus can't find me here," she thought bitterly, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. She tried the engine again. Nothing. Her phone showed no signal, just the mocking, no service message that had been her companion for the last 50 miles. The snow was already beginning to pile against her windows. "I can't stay here. I'll freeze to death." Grabbing her emergency flashlight from the glove compartment, Lily forced herself out of the car and into the storm. The wind hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath and sending her long auburn hair whipping around her face. She could barely see 3 feet ahead, but she thought she'd spotted something earlier, a break in the tree line that might lead to shelter. Each step was a battle against the knee-deep snow. Her jeans were soaked through within minutes, and her sneakers might as well have been made of paper. The cold burned her lungs with every breath, but she pushed forward, driven by the primal need to survive. That's when she heard it. A low, pained whine cutting through the storm. Lily stopped, straining to listen. There it was again, coming from somewhere to her left. An animal in distress. "I should keep walking," her rational mind insisted. "I'm barely surviving myself." But she'd never been good at ignoring suffering, even when she probably should have. It's what had kept her trapped with Marcus for 2 years. Always believing his promises to change, his claims that she was the only one who could help him. The sound came again, weaker this time. Lily turned toward it, fighting her way through the undergrowth. Her flashlight beam danced wildly in the wind, but she caught glimpses of dark fur against the white snow. As she got closer, her breath caught in her throat. It was a wolf. Massive, with thick black fur that seemed to absorb the flashlight's beam. But something was wrong. There was blood in the snow around it, and one of its legs was bent at an unnatural angle. The animal's golden eyes fixed on her, and she saw something there that made her heart skip. Intelligence, pain, and something that looked almost human. "You're losing it, Lily. It's just a wolf." But as she knelt in the snow beside the injured animal, she couldn't shake the feeling that those eyes were trying to tell her something. The wolf whined again, softer now, and she saw the trust in its gaze. A trust that seemed completely at odds with what she knew about wild animals. "Hey, it's okay," she found herself whispering, her voice gentler than it had been in months. "I'm not going to hurt you." The wolf's breathing was labored, and she could see where something, probably a falling branch in the storm, had struck its leg. Without really thinking about what she was doing, Lily shrugged out of her jacket and carefully wrapped it around the animal. "I know you're scared," she murmured, her own teeth chattering as the cold hit her thin sweater. "I'm scared too. But we're going to figure this out, okay?" The wolf's eyes never left her face, and she could swear she saw gratitude there. More than that, she saw recognition, as if this creature somehow knew her, definitely losing it. But rational or not, she couldn't leave the animal here to die. And maybe, just maybe, helping something else would help her forget about her own disasters for a while. "Can you walk?" she asked, feeling slightly ridiculous for talking to a wolf. "If I help support you?" To her amazement, the animal struggled to its feet, favoring the injured leg but managing to stand. It was huge, easily the size of a small horse, and now that it was upright, Lily felt a flutter of nervousness. This wasn't some domesticated dog. This was a predator, wild and powerful. But when the wolf looked at her again, that nervousness faded. Whatever this creature was, it wasn't going to hurt her. She was as certain of that as she was of her own name. "Okay," she said, reaching out to steady the animal. "I think I saw a cabin or something back through the trees. Can you make it that far?" The wolf leaned against her, its weight warm and oddly comforting despite the circumstances. Together they began moving through the storm, Lily's flashlight casting crazy shadows as they stumbled through the snow. She had no idea what she was doing. No idea how she was going to help an injured wolf, or how either of them was going to survive the night. But for the first time in months, she felt like she was doing something right. Something that mattered. The cabin materialized out of the blizzard like something from a fairy tale. Small but sturdy, with smoke curling from the chimney and warm light glowing in the windows. Lily's relief was so intense she almost cried. "See?" she told the wolf, who was leaning more heavily on her with each step. "I told you we'd figure it out." She helped the animal up onto the covered porch, then hesitated at the door. What was she supposed to do? Knock and ask if the owner minded her bringing a wild wolf inside? But the alternative was watching the animal die of exposure, and that wasn't an option. The door opened before she could decide. The man standing in the doorway was not what she'd expected. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the frame and dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines, except for his eyes. His eyes were golden, exactly the same shade as the wolf's. "Please," Lily said, her voice barely a whisper. "I found him in the storm. He's hurt, and I didn't know where else to go." The man's gaze moved from her to the wolf, and something flickered across his face, surprise, recognition, and something that might have been relief. When he looked back at her, his expression was carefully neutral. "Bring him inside," he said, stepping back to make room. His voice was deep with a slight roughness that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Quickly, before you both freeze to death." Chapter 2. Sanctuary and Secrets. The cabin's interior was a study in masculine simplicity. Rough-hewn log walls, a massive stone fireplace crackling with warmth, and furniture that looked like it had been built to last a century. But Lily barely noticed any of it. All her attention was focused on getting the injured wolf to the thick rug in front of the fire. "Easy," she murmured as the animal settled down with a pained whine. "That's it. Just rest now." The man, she still didn't even know his name, was already moving with a purposefulness that suggested this wasn't his first time dealing with injured wildlife. He returned from another room carrying what looked like a well-stocked medical kit. "You're soaked through," he observed, glancing at her. "There are dry clothes in the bedroom, second door down the hall. I'll look after him." Lily hesitated, suddenly reluctant to leave the wolf's side. "I should help. You should get warm before you go into hypothermia." His tone brooked no argument. "I can handle this." There was something in his voice, an authority that made her instinctively want to obey. It should have irritated her. She'd had enough of controlling men to last several lifetimes, but instead, she found it oddly comforting. For once, someone else was taking charge, someone who seemed to actually know what they were doing. The bedroom was as spartanly furnished as the rest of the cabin, but it was warm and dry. She found clothes laid out on the bed, jeans that would be too long for her, a flannel shirt that would swallow her, and thick wool socks. Everything smelled faintly of pine and something else, something wild and clean that made her feel unexpectedly safe. When she returned to the main room, the man was kneeling beside the wolf, his large hands moving with surprising gentleness as he examined the injured leg. The wolf lay perfectly still, those golden eyes fixed on his face with complete trust. "How is he?" Lily asked, settling cross-legged on the floor nearby. "The leg's not broken, just badly bruised. He'll be sore for a few days, but he'll heal." The man's voice was softer now, almost tender. "You probably saved his life, bringing him out of that storm. I couldn't just leave him there." She watched as he carefully wrapped the wolf's leg with practiced efficiency. "Are you a veterinarian?" Something flickered in his golden eyes. "Something like that." He secured the bandage and sat back on his heels. "I'm Cade. This is my cabin. Lily." She tucked a strand of damp hair behind her ear. "I'm sorry for just showing up like this. My car broke down, and then I found him, and I didn't know what else to do. You did the right thing." Cade's gaze was intense, almost searching. "Both for him and for yourself. That storm would have killed you if you'd stayed in your car." The casual way he said it sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the cold. She'd known she was in trouble, but hearing it stated so matter-of-factly made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for letting us in. I know it must be strange, having a stranger show up at your door with a wild animal. Stranger things have happened." There was something almost amused in his tone, but when she looked at him, his expression was perfectly serious. The wolf shifted, trying to get more comfortable, and made a soft sound that was almost conversational. Cade's hand moved automatically to scratch behind its ears, and the animal's eyes nearly closed in bliss. "He really trusts you," Lily observed. "Most wild animals won't let humans touch them, even when they're hurt. He knows I'm not going to hurt him." Cade's voice was carefully neutral, but there was something underneath it, something that made her study his face more closely. In the firelight, his features were all sharp angles and shadows, but there was something familiar about him, something that tugged at the edges of her memory. Though she was certain they'd never met, she would have remembered eyes that color, that intensity. "Have we met before?" she asked impulsively. "No." The answer came too quickly, too definitively. "I'd remember." There was a weight to those words that made her pulse quicken. The way he was looking at her, like he was memorizing her face, made her suddenly aware of how close they were sitting. Close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his golden eyes, close enough to catch that wild, clean scent that seemed to emanate from his skin. "Get it together, Lily. You just escaped one disaster. The last thing you need is to get involved with another mysterious man." But even as her rational mind issued warnings, something deeper was responding to Cade's presence. Something that had been dormant during her sterile relationship with Marcus was suddenly awakening, and it both thrilled and terrified her. "Where were you headed?" Cade asked, apparently oblivious to the direction of her thoughts. "Before your car broke down." "Nowhere specific." The admission felt like a defeat. "I was just driving, trying to figure out what comes next. Running from something?" She looked up sharply, surprised by his perceptiveness. "What makes you say that?" "Experience." His smile was rueful. "People don't usually end up on mountain roads in the middle of winter unless they're running from something, or towards something they're not sure they want to find." "And which are you doing?" "Both, probably." He stood in one fluid motion, all grace and controlled power. "You must be hungry." "When did you eat last?" Lily had to think about it. "Yesterday morning, I think. maybe the day before. She'd been too stressed to eat much since leaving Seattle, surviving mostly on gas station coffee and determination. "Stay with him," Cade said, nodding toward the wolf. "I'll make something." She watched him move around the small kitchen with economical efficiency, pulling ingredients from cabinets and the refrigerator. There was something almost hypnotic about the way he moved, completely aware of his body and his surroundings, like a dancer or a fighter. "Cade," she said after a few minutes, "can I ask you something?" "You can ask." His tone suggested he might not answer. "Why did you let us in?" "I mean, really? Most people would have slammed the door in my face. Especially with him." She gestured to the wolf, who had fallen asleep by the fire, his chest rising and falling peacefully. Cade was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost vulnerable. "Because you could have left him to die, and you didn't. Because you risked your own life to save something you didn't even understand." He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Because the kind of person who does that, that's the kind of person the world needs more of. The simple honesty of it hit her like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had seen something good in her? Marcus had spent 2 years cataloging her flaws, her shortcomings, all the ways she didn't measure up to his expectations. Her family had written her off as the failure who couldn't even manage a proper engagement. But this stranger, this man she'd known for less than an hour, looked at her like she was someone worth saving. "I'm not..." She started to protest, then stopped. Maybe it was time to stop accepting other people's opinions of her worth. "Yes, you are," Cade said quietly, as if he could read her thoughts. "Whatever you're running from, whatever made you think you're not worth much, they were wrong." The wolf stirred at the sound of their voices, lifting his massive head to look at them. For just a moment, Lily could swear she saw something almost human in those golden eyes. Approval, maybe even affection. "You're imagining things," she told herself. "Wolves don't have opinions about human relationships." But as she met that steady gaze, she couldn't shake the feeling that this animal understood far more than he should. Chapter 3. Dangerous Recognition. The storm raged through the night, rattling the windows and piling snow against the cabin walls. Lily dozed fitfully on the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket that smelled like pine and wood smoke. Every time she stirred, she was aware of 2 things: the steady breathing of the wolf by the fireplace, and Cade's watchful presence in the chair across the room. He never seemed to sleep. Every time she opened her eyes, he was there, those golden eyes alert and focused, as if he were standing guard against some unseen threat. It should have made her nervous, but instead, she felt safer than she had in months. Dawn came slowly, the storm finally beginning to ease as pale light filtered through the frosted windows. Lily woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, her stomach immediately reminding her that she hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. The wolf was awake too, watching her with what looked suspiciously like amusement as she tried to untangle herself from the blanket without falling off the couch. "Morning," Cade said from the kitchen, not turning around. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted, surprised by how true it was. "How's our patient?" "See for yourself." The wolf was already on his feet, moving with only a slight limp as he patted over to her. When she held out her hand, he pressed his massive head against her palm, and she felt that same jolt of recognition she'd experienced the night before. "You're feeling better, aren't you?" she murmured, scratching behind his ears the way she'd seen Cade do. "I'm glad." "He likes you," Cade observed, setting a plate of food in front of her. "That's unusual." "What do you mean?" "Wolves don't typically bond with strangers. They're pack animals. They know their own, and they're suspicious of everyone else." He settled into the chair across from her, his own breakfast untouched. but he trusted you from the moment you found him." Lily studied the wolf, who had settled at her feet like an oversized dog. Maybe he could sense that I wasn't going to hurt him. Maybe. But there was something in Cade's tone that suggested he thought there was more to it than that. They ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the wolf's occasional contented sighs. But Lily was becoming increasingly aware of the tension radiating from her host. He kept glancing toward the windows, his body language suggesting he was listening for something she couldn't hear. "Is everything okay?" she finally asked. "The storm's passing," he said, which wasn't really an answer. "The roads should be clear enough for travel by this afternoon." It took her a moment to understand what he was really saying. He wanted her to leave. The knowledge hit her harder than it should have, considering she'd known him less than 24 hours. "Right," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "I should probably call for a tow truck, see if they can get my car running." "I can drive you to town," he offered, but there was something reluctant in his voice, as if the words were being pulled from him against his will. "You don't have to do that. I've already imposed enough." "It's not—" He stopped, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture that seemed unconsciously frustrated. "It's not safe for you to be out there alone. Not right now." "Not safe how?" The way he said it sent a prickle of unease down her spine. "It's just snow. It's not the weather I'm worried about." His golden eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her pulse quicken. Not just concern, but fear. "There are things in these mountains, Lily. Things that hunt." The rational part of her mind wanted to dismiss his words as paranoid nonsense, but the conviction in his voice, the way the wolf's ears had pricked at the mention of hunting, made her think twice. What kind of things? Cade hesitated, and she could see him weighing his words carefully. "Predators. They come down from the high country when the weather's bad, looking for easy prey. A woman alone, stranded." He shook his head. "It wouldn't end well." Before she could respond, the wolf's head snapped up, his ears swiveling toward the door. A low growl rumbled in his chest, and every muscle in his body went tense. Cade was on his feet instantly, moving with that same fluid grace she'd noticed the night before. But now there was something predatory in his posture, something dangerous. "Stay back," he told her, his voice carrying an authority that made her obey without thinking. The howl came from somewhere outside, long, haunting, and definitely not human. It was answered by another and another, until the morning air was filled with a chorus that raised every hair on Lily's arms. "Wolves," she whispered. "Yes." Cade's voice was grim, but not like him. He nodded toward their injured companion, who was now standing protectively in front of Lily, his lips pulled back in a silent snarl. "These are different." "Different how?" But before he could answer, something slammed into the cabin's front door with enough force to make the entire structure shake. The howls grew louder, more urgent, and Lily could hear the scratch of claws against wood. "The bedroom," Cade said urgently. "Now, lock the door and don't come out no matter what you hear." "What about you?" "What about him?" She gestured to the wolf, who was now pressed against her legs, trembling with either fear or rage. "We'll be fine. Go. Now." The authority in his voice brooked no argument, but as she backed toward the hallway, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something crucial. The way Cade moved, the way the injured wolf responded to him, the way those golden eyes seemed to hold secrets she couldn't begin to guess at. Another impact, against the door, and this time she heard wood splintering. "Lily!" Cade's voice cracked like a whip. "Go!" She ran. From behind the locked bedroom door, she could hear sounds that didn't make sense, growls and snarls that seemed too deep to be coming from any animal she knew, the crash of furniture being overturned, and underneath it all, a sound that raised goosebumps along her arms. The unmistakable sound of something large and powerful moving through the cabin. But no human voices. No words. Just the primal sounds of predators in conflict. The fighting went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, gradually, the sounds faded, replaced by an eerie quiet that was somehow more frightening than the chaos had been. Lily pressed her ear to the door, straining to hear anything that might tell her what was happening. Had Cade been hurt? Killed? What about the injured wolf? He told you not to come out no matter what you heard. But what if he needed help? What if whatever had been trying to get in had succeeded? The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Just when she thought she couldn't stand the uncertainty any longer, she heard a soft knock on the door. "Lily?" Cade's voice, sounding tired but alive. "It's safe now. You can come out." She unlocked the door with shaking hands and stepped into the hallway. The cabin looked like a hurricane had hit it. Furniture overturned, deep gouges in the wooden walls, and the front door hanging off its hinges. But Cade was standing in the middle of it all, apparently unharmed. The wolf was beside him, still favoring his injured leg but alert and watchful. "What happened?" she whispered. "Pack hunters," Cade said, his voice carefully neutral. "They smelled weakness and came looking for an easy meal. But they found out it wasn't as easy as they thought." She looked around at the destruction, then back at him. He didn't have a scratch on him. Neither did the wolf. In fact, if it weren't for the destroyed cabin, she might have thought nothing had happened at all. "How did you fight them off?" "Experience," he said, the same answer he'd given her before. And they weren't expecting resistance. It wasn't a real answer, and they both knew it. But as she studied his face, she realized that Cade was a man with secrets, deep ones. The question was whether she was brave enough to stick around long enough to discover what they were, or whether he'd let her. Chapter 4. The Pull of Truth. The next 3 days passed in a strange bubble of domesticity that felt both natural and surreal. Cade had boarded up the broken door and windows with practiced efficiency, as if this wasn't the first time his home had been attacked by wild animals. Lily tried not to think too hard about what that might mean. She told herself she was staying to help with the cleanup, and to make sure the wolf, whom she'd started calling Shadow, was fully recovered. But the truth was, she couldn't bring herself to leave. Every time Cade mentioned driving her to town, she found another reason to delay. The rational part of her mind kept insisting this was dangerous. She barely knew this man, and there were too many things about him that didn't add up. The way he moved with predatory grace. The way animals seemed to recognize and trust him instantly. The way his eyes sometimes caught the light like an animal's. But the deeper part of her, the part that had been dormant during her sterile relationship with Marcus, was fully awake now. And it was telling her that whatever Cade was hiding, whatever danger he might represent, he wasn't dangerous to her. "You're thinking too loud," he said on the 4th morning, not looking up from the wood he was splitting outside the cabin. Lily nearly dropped the coffee mug she'd been carrying out to him. "What?" "You get this line between your eyebrows when you're thinking hard about something." He straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "What's on your mind?" She wanted to ask him about the night of the attack, about how 2 men and an injured wolf had somehow fought off what sounded like an entire pack of predators, about why he lived alone in the middle of nowhere, and how he seemed to know things about survival that most people never needed to learn. Instead, she said, "Why do you live up here?" "So far from everything?" He was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes focused on something in the distance. "Peace," he said finally. "Down there, in the world, it's complicated. Up here, things are simpler, more honest." "More honest how?" Animals don't lie, he said. They don't pretend to be something they're not. They don't make promises they can't keep. His gaze found hers, and she saw a flash of old pain there. They just are what they are. Sounds like you've been hurt, she said softly. Haven't we all? But there was something in his tone that suggested his hurt went deeper than most. What about you? What were you running from when your car broke down? She'd been expecting the question for days, but it still made her stomach tighten. My fiancé. Ex-fiancé. She took a sip of coffee, using the warmth to steady herself. I found out he was cheating. Has been. Probably for our entire relationship. I'm sorry. The worst part wasn't even the cheating, she found herself saying. It was realizing that I'd never really known him at all. 2 years, and he was a complete stranger. I kept thinking there had to be signs I missed, but looking back, I think he never let me see who he really was. Cade set down the axe and moved closer to her. That's not your fault. Isn't it? What does it say about me that I was so clueless? That I accepted so little from someone who was supposed to love me? It says you trusted someone who didn't deserve it. His voice was fierce, protective in a way that made her heart skip. It says you have a generous heart, and he took advantage of that. The sincerity in his voice made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. You don't even know me. I know enough. He reached out as if to touch her face, then stopped himself, his hand falling back to his side. I know you risked your life to save an injured animal. I know you've been taking care of him like he's your own. I know you make the worst coffee I've ever tasted, but you always remember to bring me a cup anyway. Despite her emotional state, she laughed. My coffee's not that bad. It really is. But he was smiling when he said it, and the expression transformed his entire face. Without the hard lines of wariness and control, he looked younger, more approachable, more human. I should probably go, she said, though the words felt like they were being torn from her. I can't hide up here forever. Why not? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? I mean, why can't you stay? What's really waiting for you down there? She opened her mouth to give him all the logical reasons. She needed a job, a place to live, to rebuild her life. But as she looked around at the peaceful clearing, at the mountains rising majestically in the distance, at Cade's face watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken, all those reasons seemed suddenly insubstantial. Nothing, she admitted. There's nothing waiting for me. Then stay. The simple words hit her like a physical blow. Cade, I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other. But something happens to time up here, Lily. A day can feel like a month, or a month can feel like a day. What matters isn't how long you've known someone. It's how deeply. She wanted to say yes. The word was right there, balanced on the tip of her tongue. But the rational part of her mind was screaming warnings. I can't just abandon my entire life. What life? The question was gentle but implacable. The apartment that was his, the friends who are probably his friends too, the job where everyone knows your personal business. Each point hit home because it was true. Marcus hadn't just been her fiancé, he'd been her entire world. When she'd left him, she'd left everything. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course. But she could see the disappointment in his eyes, quickly masked. Take all the time you need. That evening, as they sat by the fire with shadows sprawled between them, Lily found herself studying Cade's profile. There was something otherworldly about him in the firelight, something that made her think of ancient myths and wild magic. Can I ask you something? She said impulsively. Always. That night when the pack attacked, how did you really fight them off? She felt him go still beside her, saw the careful way he set down his coffee mug. I told you. You told me about experience and resistance. But I heard what happened, Cade. There were no gunshots, no human voices. Just... She struggled to find words for what she'd heard. Just animals fighting. Shadow lifted, his head to look at her. Those golden eyes, so similar to Cade's, holding an intelligence that still made her breath catch. What are you asking me, Lily? His voice was carefully neutral, but she could feel the tension radiating from him. Whatever she said next would change everything between them. She was certain of that. I'm asking if you're going to trust me with the truth, she said quietly. The way I've trusted you. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackling of the fire. Then Cade stood abruptly, pacing to the window and staring out into the darkness. Some truths are dangerous, he said finally. Some secrets are kept not to deceive, but to protect. Protect who? Me or you? Both. She joined him at the window, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. What if I don't want to be protected? What if I want to know who you really are? He turned to face her, and in his golden eyes she saw a war between longing and fear. You think you do, he said softly. But once you know, you can never unknow it. And it will change everything. Everything's already changed, she whispered. From the moment I found him in the storm, from the moment you opened that door, nothing's been the same. Cade's control finally cracked. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with reverent gentleness. Lily, he said, her name a prayer and a warning all at once. Show me, she breathed. Show me who you really are. Chapter 5. The Revelation. Cade stared at her for a long moment, his thumb still tracing gentle circles on her cheek. She could see the exact moment he made his decision. Something shifted in his expression, a wall coming down that she hadn't even realized was there. All right, he said quietly, but not here. And not like this. He stepped back, his hand falling away from her face, leaving her feeling strangely bereft. If you really want to know, you'll have to trust me completely. Can you do that? Lily's heart was hammering against her ribs, but she nodded. Yes. Then come with me. Both of you, he added, glancing at Shadow, who had risen to his feet as if he understood that something momentous was about to happen. Cade led them outside into the crisp mountain air. The moon was full, casting everything in silver light, and Lily could see her breath misting in the cold. She started to shiver, but Cade shook his head when she moved to go back for her coat. You won't need it, he said, and there was something in his voice, a roughness, an edge, that made her pulse quicken. They walked in silence to a clearing about 50 yards from the cabin, a natural circle surrounded by towering pines. The moonlight was even brighter here, and Lily could see everything with startling clarity. Stay there, Cade said, positioning her at the edge of the clearing. No matter what happens, don't move. Don't speak, just watch. She nodded, though her throat felt too tight for words anyway. Beside her, Shadow sat perfectly still, his golden eyes fixed on Cade with an intensity that bordered on reverence. Cade walked to the center of the clearing and turned to face her. In the moonlight, he looked like something out of a dream. Tall and powerful, his dark hair catching silver highlights, his golden eyes luminous in the pale light. I need you to understand, he said, his voice carrying easily across the distance between them. That everything I'm about to show you, I'm showing you because I trust you, because something inside me recognizes something inside you, and I can't fight it anymore. Lily's breath caught. Cade. And I need you to understand, he continued, that once you see this, there's no going back. Not for either of us. She wanted to ask what he meant, but the words died in her throat as he began to change. It started with his posture, a subtle shifting, as if he were settling into his own skin in a way he hadn't before. Then his clothes began to fall away, but Lily barely noticed because her attention was fixed on what was happening to his body. His muscles were expanding, his bones lengthening and reshaping with sounds that should have been horrifying but somehow weren't. Dark fur began to sprout along his arms and chest, spreading rapidly across his skin. His face was changing too, his jaw extending, his teeth sharpening, his ears moving higher on his head. Through it all, his eyes remained the same. Golden, intelligent, and fixed on her face. The transformation took less than a minute, though it felt like hours. When it was complete, where Cade had been standing, there was now a massive black wolf, even larger than Shadow, with the same dark fur and the same unmistakable golden eyes. Lily's knees gave out. She sank to the forest floor, her mind struggling to process what she'd just witnessed. The rational part of her brain was screaming that this was impossible, that she was hallucinating, that she'd finally had the nervous breakdown her mother had been predicting for years. But the deeper part of her, the part that had recognized something otherworldly in Cade from the moment she'd met him, was oddly calm. This explained everything. His preternatural grace, his uncanny connection with animals, the way he'd fought off an entire pack of predators without a scratch. The wolf, Cade, took a step toward her, and she saw the uncertainty in his posture. He was waiting for her reaction, she realized. Waiting to see if she would run screaming into the night or accept this impossible truth. Lily looked from him to Shadow, understanding flooding through her like cold water. "You're both werewolves," she whispered. Cade's wolf form dipped his massive head in confirmation. "That's why he trusted me so easily. That's why you both fought off those other wolves." She was talking to herself as much as to them, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "That's why you knew he would heal, why you live up here alone." She trailed, off, remembering something else. That first night, when I asked if we'd met before. "We hadn't, but I'd seen your eyes. In him." She gestured to Shadow. "You were already watching me, weren't you?" Another nod from the massive black wolf. "How long?" she asked. "How long were you watching me before I found him in the storm?" Cade began to shift back, the transformation flowing in reverse until he was human again, naked in the moonlight, but seemingly unbothered by the cold. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. 3 days, he admitted. I'd been tracking the pack that was moving through the area, making sure they didn't get too close to the human settlements. I was in wolf form when I saw your car on the road, saw you pull over to sleep. You were watching me sleep? She should have been creeped out, but instead she felt strangely flattered. I was making sure you were safe, he said defensively. A lone woman, sleeping in her car in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't safe. So when the storm hit, I saw you get stranded. I was planning to approach you as a human, offer to help, but then the tree branch came down and caught me in the leg. By the time I could think clearly again, you were already there, wrapping me in your jacket, talking to me like I mattered. Lily felt tears prick her eyes. You do matter. Do I? His voice was raw, vulnerable. Even now? Even knowing what I am? She stood on unsteady legs and walked toward him. He tensed as she approached, as if expecting her to run, but she didn't stop until she was close enough to touch him. You're still you, she said simply. You're still the man who let a stranger into his home, who took care of an injured wolf, who made me feel safe for the first time in months. The man who sees something good in me when I can barely see it myself. Lily. Her name was a broken sound on his lips. Is this why you don't live among people? Because you're afraid they'll react badly to what you are? My kind. We're not meant to be alone, he said quietly. We're pack animals, like regular wolves. But my pack? He shook his head. That's a story for another time. The point is, yes, I live alone because it's safer. For everyone. But you're not alone anymore, she said, reaching out to touch his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palm. Are you? No, he whispered, his hand covering hers. I'm not. Shadow chose that moment to pad over to them, pressing his massive head against their joined hands. Lily laughed despite everything. I take it you approve? She asked him. The wolf made a sound that was almost like a chuckle, and she could swear he was grinning. He's been waiting for this moment as long as I have, Cade said softly. Werewolves. We mate for life, Lily. When we find our true mate, there's no question, no doubt. We know. Her breath caught. Are you saying? I'm saying that from the moment I saw you risk everything to save him, I knew you were mine. And he knew it too. Cade's golden eyes were intense, searching her face. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Chapter 6. The Choice Between Worlds. Lily stared at him, her mind reeling. Mate for life, she repeated slowly. As in forever, Cade said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. As in, you're the other half of my soul, and I would rather die than live without you. The words should have terrified her. A week ago, she'd been engaged to a man she thought she knew, planning a life that had turned out to be built on lies. The smart thing to do would be to run. From Cade, from this impossible situation, from feelings that were too intense and too deep for someone she'd known less than a week. But as she stood there in the moonlight, with his hand covering hers and Shadow leaning against their legs like a furry seal of approval, running was the last thing on her mind. This is crazy, she whispered. Yes, he agreed. Completely insane. I don't even know your last name. Morrison. Cade Morrison. A small smile tugged at his lips. And you're Lily Chen, 28 years old, Seattle native. Worked in marketing for a tech company until you quit 3 days before you were supposed to get married. She blinked. How do you know all that? Your purse was in the car when I checked it for supplies. I may have looked at your driver's license. You went through my purse? I was worried about you, he said defensively. I needed to know who you were, if someone would come looking for you. And? His expression grew serious. Your ex-fiancé filed a missing person report. There's been a search party looking for you. The news hit her like a physical blow. Marcus is looking for me? According to the radio reports, yes. He's been all over the local news, playing the concerned fiancé whose beloved disappeared without a trace. Lily felt sick. She could picture it perfectly. Marcus in his expensive suit, his perfectly styled hair, his practiced expression of worry. He'd always been good at manipulating public opinion. He doesn't love me, she said quietly. He's just angry that I left before he could control the narrative. I know, Cade said gently. But the authorities don't. They think you might be in danger. I am in danger, she said with a bitter laugh. Just not the kind they're thinking of. Shadow whined softly, pressing closer to her as if he could sense her distress. She buried her fingers in his thick fur, drawing comfort from his warmth. I have to go back, don't I? She said, though the thought made her chest tight with panic. Not necessarily. Cade's voice was carefully neutral. You're an adult. You have the right to disappear if you want to. But your family is worried sick. Your sister's been on the news too, begging for anyone with information to come forward. Lily closed her eyes. Emma, sweet, responsible Emma, who'd probably been cleaning up Lily's messes since she was old enough to hold a mop. Of course she was worried. "I have to call her," she said. "I have to let her know I'm okay." "We can drive down to town tomorrow," Cade offered. "There's better cell reception there." "And then?" "Then you decide what you want to do." His golden eyes were steady on hers. "I won't try to influence your choice, Lily. This has to be something you want, not something you feel obligated to do." But even as he said the words, she could see the fear in his expression. The fear that she would choose her old life over this new, impossible one he was offering. "What would it mean?" she asked quietly. "If I stayed? If I chose this?" "It would mean leaving the human world behind," he said honestly. "Not forever, necessarily, but mostly. My kind, we live on the edges of civilization. We have to, for everyone's safety. Because you're dangerous? Because some of us are, yes. And because there are always humans who would hunt us if they knew we existed." His jaw tightened. The pack that attacked the cabin, they weren't just random predators. They were looking for me specifically. Lily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "Why?" "Because I left my original pack 5 years ago, and they don't like loose ends." His voice was matter of fact, but she could hear the old pain underneath. "I was supposed to be alpha after my father died, but I wouldn't do what they wanted me to do." "What did they want?" "To expand our territory by force. To take what we wanted from human settlements instead of living peacefully alongside them." His hands clenched into fists. "To rule through fear instead of respect." "So you left." "So I left. And they've been hunting me ever since, trying to bring me back or eliminate the threat they think I represent." Lily felt pieces clicking into place. "That's why Shadow was injured when I found him." He'd been fighting them off. Cade nodded. "He's my beta, my second in command, essentially. He followed me when I left the pack, and he's been watching my back ever since." She looked down at the massive wolf, seeing him in an entirely new light. "You've been protecting him all this time." Shadow looked up at her with those intelligent golden eyes and made a soft sound that somehow conveyed both affection and determination. "We protect each other," Cade said simply. "That's what pack means." "And if I stayed," Lily said carefully, "I would be part of your pack?" "You would be my mate," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Which makes you pack alpha by default. Shadow would protect you with his life, just as he protects me." The weight of responsibility that implied was staggering. But as she looked at these two magnificent creatures who had somehow decided she was worth their loyalty, she felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in her adult life, she felt like she belonged somewhere. "I need to think," she said finally. "Of course." But she could see how much the words cost him. They walked back to the cabin in silence, the weight of unspoken possibilities heavy between them. When they reached the porch, Cade stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. "Whatever you decide," he said quietly, "I want you to know that these past few days, they've been the best of my life." The simple honesty of it nearly undid her. "Cade, I know it's not fair to put that on you. I know you don't owe me anything, but I needed to say it." She reached up and cupped his face in her hands, feeling the slight roughness of stubble against her palms. "It's not about fairness," she said softly. "It's about what's right. What feels true. And what feels true to you." She looked into his golden eyes, seeing her own reflection there, and knew with sudden, crystal clarity what her answer would be. But first, she had to make one phone call. Chapter 7. Confronting the Past. The drive to town was tense, filled with unspoken words and stolen glances. Cade had insisted on coming with her, though he stayed in the truck while she used the payphone outside the general store. Shadow waited in the bed of the truck, alert and watchful despite the curious looks from passers-by. Lily's hands shook as she dialed her sister's number. Emma answered on the first ring. "Hello?" "Em, it's me." "Lily?" The relief in her sister's voice was overwhelming. "Oh God, where are you? Are you okay? Everyone's been looking for you." "I'm fine," Lily said quickly. "I'm safe, I promise. I needed some time to think." "Think about what?" "Marcus said you just disappeared, that you took some of your things but left everything else. He's been going crazy with worry." Lily closed her eyes. Even now, even after everything, Marcus was controlling the narrative. "Em, I need to tell you something about Marcus." "What about him?" "He was cheating on me." "Has been, probably for our entire relationship." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Lily wondered if the connection had been lost. "Emma?" "I know," her sister said quietly. "You know?" Lily's voice cracked. "You knew, and you didn't tell me?" "I suspected," Emma corrected. "I saw him with another woman a few months ago, but when I tried to bring it up, you got so defensive. You said you were happy, that Marcus was good to you. So you just let me plan a wedding to a man who was betraying me?" "I tried to hint," Emma said desperately. "I asked if you were sure about him, if you'd really thought it through. But you seemed so convinced that he was what you wanted." Lily leaned against the wall of the general store, feeling suddenly exhausted. "I wasn't convinced of anything. I was just going through the motions, doing what I thought I was supposed to do. Where are you now? I'll come get you." "No." The word came out more forcefully than she'd intended. "Em, I need you to listen to me. Really listen. Okay? I'm not coming back. Not to Seattle, not to my old life. I've found something here, something real, and I'm not going to throw it away because it's unconventional." "Here where?" "Lily, you're scaring me." "I'm in love," Lily said simply. "Really, truly in love for the first time in my life. With someone who sees me, who values me, who would never hurt me the way Marcus did. You've known him for a week. Sometimes that's all it takes." She thought about Cade's words about werewolf mates, about the instant recognition of souls. Sometimes you just know. Emma was quiet for a long moment. "What about your job? Your apartment? Your life?" "What life?" Lily echoed Cade's earlier words. "The job where I was miserable? The apartment that was really Marcus's? The friends who were really his friends?" She took a shaky breath. "Em, I've been sleepwalking for years. I'm finally awake." "This is crazy, Lily. You can't just disappear into the mountains with some stranger." "I can, and I am." The certainty in her own voice surprised her. "But I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Tell Marcus I'm fine. Tell him I'm not coming back, and that he can have the apartment, the deposits, all of it. I don't want anything from him." "He won't accept that. He's already talking about hiring a private investigator." Lily felt a chill of fear. If Marcus sent investigators, they might find her. And if they found her, they might discover Cade's secret. "Then tell him." She struggled to find words that would convince him to leave her alone. "Tell him I've found someone else. Someone I was seeing behind his back. Let him think I was the cheater." "Lily." "Let him hate me, Em. It's better than him thinking he can get me back." From the truck, she could see Cade watching her, his expression tense with concern. Shadow had his head up, ears pricked, as if he could sense her distress even from this distance. "I have to go," she said to Emma. but I'm okay. I'm happy, maybe for the first time in my adult life. Can you be happy for me too? Emma's sigh was audible across the connection. If you're sure this is what you want. I am. Then I love you, and I support you. But Lily? Yeah? If you ever need me, if anything happens, you call me. Immediately. Promise me. I promise. The words felt like a vow. I love you too, Em. She hung up the phone and walked back to the truck on unsteady legs. Cade was out of the cab before she'd taken 3 steps, his arms coming around her as her carefully held composure finally cracked. Hey, he murmured against her hair. It's okay. You did the hard part. She knew, Lily said against his chest. Emma knew Marcus was cheating, and she didn't tell me because she thought I was happy. Were you? Happy? Lily thought about it honestly. No, I was comfortable, settled, but not happy. She pulled back to look at him. I didn't even know what happiness felt like until I met you. Something shifted in his expression, hope and relief, and something deeper all tangled together. Does that mean ... quote? It means I'm staying, she said firmly. It means I choose you. I choose us. I choose this impossible, beautiful life you're offering me. Cade's kiss was fierce and gentle all at once, filled with promises she was only beginning to understand. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw tears in his golden eyes. You're sure? He asked, his voice rough. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Shadow chose that moment to leap down from the truck bed and press against them both, his tail wagging so hard his entire body wiggled. Lily laughed through her own tears. I think he approves, she said. He's not the only one, Cade murmured, pulling her close again. But even as they held each other in the parking lot of a small mountain town, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Marcus wouldn't give up easily. She knew him well enough to know that. And if Cade's former pack was still hunting him, her presence might make him an even bigger target. The challenges ahead were real and dangerous. But as she looked into Cade's eyes and felt the solid warmth of his arms around her, she knew they would face them together. She was done running from her life. Now she was ready to run toward it. Chapter 8. The bond deepens. The weeks that followed were like living in a dream. Cade taught her the rhythms of mountain life, how to read the weather and the behavior of animals, how to track prey through the forest, how to move silently through the underbrush. She was a quick learner, and he was a patient teacher, though she sometimes caught him watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. You're adapting faster than most humans would, he told her one evening as they sat by the rebuilt fireplace. It's like you were born for this life. Maybe I was, she said, leaning against his shoulder. Maybe I just never knew it. Shadow, who had taken to sleeping across both their feet like a living blanket, made a contented rumbling sound that might have been agreement. It wasn't all peaceful domesticity, though. There were nights when Cade would disappear for hours, returning tense and alert, his clothes torn and sometimes bloodied. He never talked about where he'd been, but Lily could guess. The rival pack was still out there, still hunting, and he was still protecting not just himself now, but her. Let me help, she said after one particularly bad night, when he'd come home with claw marks across his back. I can learn to fight. Absolutely not. His voice was sharp with fear. Lily, you don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. He was quiet for a long moment, his hands still as she cleaned his wounds. When werewolves fight, we don't just use claws and teeth. We use everything. Strength, speed, instincts that go back thousands of years. You're human. You're brave and strong and amazing, but against a werewolf. He shook his head. I won't lose you. I can't. And I can't lose you either. She pressed a kiss to his uninjured shoulder. There has to be something I can do. There is. He turned to face her, his golden eyes serious. You can let me and Shadow protect you. You can trust us to keep you safe. It wasn't the answer she wanted, but she could hear the desperate need in his voice. Being able to protect her was clearly fundamental to his sense of self, his identity as her mate. Fighting him on it would only cause them both pain. But that didn't mean she had to like being helpless. The change in their relationship came gradually. What had started as desperate attraction was deepening into something richer, more complex. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Her childhood in Seattle, his memories of growing up in a werewolf pack, their dreams and fears and the small daily details that made up a life. What was it like? She asked one night. Growing up knowing you were different? Confusing, he said honestly. Human children don't shift until they hit adolescence, so for the first 13 years of my life, I was just a normal kid who happened to live with people who sometimes turned into wolves. Then one morning I woke up on 4 legs instead of 2, and everything changed. Changed how? Suddenly I could smell emotions, hear heartbeats from across the room, sense things that human senses can't detect. And the pack dynamics that had been invisible to me as a child became impossible to ignore. Pack dynamics? His expression darkened. Dominance, submission, the constant testing of boundaries and hierarchy. In human form, my father was just a man. In wolf form, he was an alpha, and that meant something very different. Lily heard the old pain in his voice and reached for his hand. Is that why you left? Because you didn't want to be like him? Partly. Cade's fingers intertwined with hers. But mostly I left because I realized that the way we were living, taking what we wanted, ruling through fear, treating humans as prey instead of neighbors, it wasn't pack behavior. It was predator behavior. What's the difference? A pack protects. Predators just consume. His golden eyes met hers. I wanted to protect people, not hunt them. And that made me a liability to my father's vision of what our pack should be. So you became a lone wolf. So I tried to. But wolves aren't meant to be alone, Lily. We need pack, need family, need connection to survive. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Until I found you, I was slowly dying from the isolation. The words hit her harder than she'd expected. Cade, I don't tell you that to make you feel guilty, he said quickly. I tell you that so you understand what you've given me. You didn't just save my life that night in the storm. You saved my soul. She was quiet for a moment, absorbing the weight of his words. What about Shadow? Wasn't he pack for you? Cade smiled, glancing at the wolf who was sprawled in front of the fire. Shadow's my beta, my brother in every way that matters. But he's not my mate. He can't complete me the way you do. Complete you how? Instead of answering with words, Cade leaned forward and kissed her. It started gentle, almost hesitant, but quickly deepened into something hungry and desperate. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes had taken on that golden glow she'd learned meant his wolf was close to the surface. Like that, he said roughly. When I'm with you, when I touch you, I feel whole for the first time in my life. The confession hung between them, loaded with possibilities and promises. They'd been dancing around this moment for weeks, the attraction between them building to an almost unbearable tension. But Lily had needed time to be sure, and Cade had been patient, giving her space to make her own choices. Now, looking into his glowing eyes and seeing the careful control he was exerting over himself, she realized she was done waiting. Show me, she whispered. echoing the words she'd used the night he'd revealed his true nature. Show me what it means to be your mate. Chapter 9. The claiming Cade went very still, his eyes searching her face. Lily, are you sure? Because once we do this, once we complete the bond, there's no going back, she finished for him. I know, and I don't want there to be. The bond between mates, it's not just physical, he said, his voice rough with barely contained need. It's spiritual, emotional, mental. You'll feel everything I feel, know things about me that I've never told anyone. And I'll know you the same way. Will it hurt? No. His thumb traced her lower lip with reverent gentleness. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. But it's also permanent, Lily. Forever, in every sense of the word. She thought about her relationship with Marcus, how even after 2 years she'd felt like she was living with a stranger. Then she thought about these past weeks with Cade, how she'd felt more known, more seen, more understood than ever before in her life. I want forever with you, she said simply. I want all of it. Cade's control finally snapped. He pulled her against him, his mouth claiming hers in a kiss that was pure possession. She could taste his hunger, his desperate need, and answered it with her own. When he lifted her in his arms, she didn't protest. When he carried her to the bedroom, she went willingly. And when he laid her down on the bed with a gentleness that belied the fierce need in his eyes, she pulled him down to her with hands that shook only slightly. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love all of you, the man and the wolf, the protector and the predator. And I love you, he said, his voice breaking with emotion. My mate, my heart, my salvation. What happened next was beyond anything Lily had ever experienced. It wasn't just the physical joining, though that was intense enough to leave her gasping and clinging to him like he was her anchor in a storm. It was the moment when she felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth spreading outward from her heart until it filled every cell in her body. Suddenly, she could feel what Cade was feeling, the overwhelming love, the fierce protectiveness, the complete and utter certainty that she was his and he was hers. She could sense Shadow in the next room, feel his contentment at his pack being complete. She could even detect the presence of other wolves in the distant mountains, their alien thoughts brushing against the edges of her consciousness. Oh, she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. I know, Cade said, his forehead pressed against hers. It's incredible, isn't it? It was. It was like suddenly being able to see in color after a lifetime of black and white. Every emotion was more vivid, every sensation more intense. She felt connected not just to Cade, but to the entire natural world around them. Is this how you always feel? She asked. This is how I feel when I'm with you, he said, pressing gentle kisses to her face. Complete. Whole. Home. They lay tangled together afterward, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Through their new bond, she could feel his contentment, his peace, his love surrounding her like a warm blanket. What happens now? She asked softly. Now we're mated, he said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. In the eyes of any werewolf who meets us, you're my wife, my partner, my equal. You're pack alpha, which means other wolves will defer to you just as they would to me. That's a lot of responsibility. You can handle it. His voice was full of confidence. You've got the heart of a protector, Lily. I saw it that first night when you risked everything to save Shadow. As if hearing his name, the wolf in question padded into the bedroom and settled on the rug beside the bed. His golden eyes met Lily's, and she felt his approval through the bond, his acceptance of her as pack. Welcome to the family, she said to him, and could swear he grinned in response. But even as she basked in the warmth of belonging, of being truly accepted for the first time in her life, she couldn't shake a niggling worry. "Cade," she said carefully, "what about your old pack? Now that we're bonded, does that make me a target too?" She felt his body tense beneath her, his emotions shifting from contentment to concern through their bond. "I won't let them hurt you," he said fiercely. "Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, I'll keep you safe." "That's not what I asked." He was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he said finally. "Being mated to me makes you a target. They'll see you as a weakness they can exploit, or as a way to force me back into the pack. Then we need to be prepared for them to come." "They won't get near you," Cade said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of an alpha. "I promise you that." But through their bond, Lily could feel his fear. Not for himself. He would face any danger without hesitation. But for her, for their newly formed pack, for the life they were trying to build together. She pressed a kiss to his chest, over his heart. "We'll face whatever comes," she said firmly. "Together." "Together?" he agreed, but she could still feel the shadow of worry in his mind. Neither of them knew that high in the mountains above, golden eyes were watching the cabin, and a plan was already in motion. Chapter 10. The Final Hunt. The attack came 3 nights later, just before dawn when the moon was setting and the world was caught between darkness and light. Lily woke to Shadow's low growl and the feeling of Cade's tension through their bond before she consciously heard the sounds that had alerted them. The soft pad of multiple paws on snow, the rustle of bodies moving through the underbrush. "How many?" she whispered, slipping out of bed to dress quickly. Cade was already pulling on clothes, his movements sharp and efficient. "At least 6, maybe more." Through their bond, she felt his grim determination. "This isn't a patrol or a warning. This is a hunting party. What do they want? Me, and now you." His golden eyes met hers in the dim light. "They're going to try to take you to force my hand." Lily felt a chill of fear, but also anger. "Like hell they are." "Lily." "No." She cut him off, her voice firm. "I'm not hiding while you and Shadow fight for our lives. We're pack now, right? That means we protect each other." She could feel his internal struggle through their bond, his desperate need to keep her safe warring with his recognition that she was right. They were stronger together than apart. "Stay behind us," he said finally. "And if I tell you to run, you run. Promise me." "I promise," she lied, knowing he could feel the deception through their bond, but hoping he'd be too distracted to call her on it. They moved through the cabin quickly and quietly, Cade checking weapons while Shadow positioned himself by the front door. The wolf's hackles were raised, his lips pulled back in a silent snarl that revealed teeth like ivory daggers. "They're surrounding us," Cade said softly, his head tilted as he listened to sounds Lily couldn't hear. "Standard pack hunting formation. They want to drive us toward the clearing." "Is that bad?" "It's what I would do if I wanted to take prisoners instead of kill targets." His expression was grim. "They still think they can bring me back." "Can they?" "Not while I'm breathing." The first howl came from the east, long and haunting and unmistakably challenging. It was answered by another from the west, then another from the north. They were completely surrounded. "Cade Morrison!" A voice called from the darkness, rough with authority and old anger. "Come out, son." "It's time to come home." Lily felt Cade's entire body go rigid with tension. Through their bond, she sensed a complex tangle of emotions, rage, pain, and underneath it all, old grief. "That's my father," he said quietly. "Marcus Morrison, Alpha of the Blackstone Pack." "Your father?" Lily's voice came out as barely a whisper. The one and only. Cade's smile was bitter. I should have known he'd come himself for this. Cade, the voice called again, closer now. I know you're in there. And I know you're not alone. Bring her out. Let's settle this like civilized people. Civilized, Cade muttered. Right. But he moved toward the door anyway, Shadow flanking him, Lily close behind. When they stepped out onto the porch, she could see them. Massive shapes moving in the pre-dawn darkness. Eyes that glowed gold and silver in the fading moonlight. The man who stepped into the clearing was tall and broad-shouldered like Cade. But where Cade moved with fluid grace, this man moved with the heavy authority of absolute power. His hair was silver-streaked, his face lined, but his golden eyes were as sharp and dangerous as any predator's. Hello, son, Marcus Morrison said, his voice carrying easily across the distance. You're looking well. Can't say the same for you, Cade replied, his tone carefully neutral. You look tired, old man. Leading a pack getting too much for you? Marcus's smile was all teeth. Nothing I can't handle. Though I admit chasing my wayward son across 3 states has been educational. I'm not your son anymore. I left, remember? You can't leave pack, Cade. You know that. Blood is blood, no matter how far you run. Lily could feel the tension radiating from Cade, the old wounds his father's words were reopening. She stepped up beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched, offering what comfort she could. Marcus's eyes fixed on her with predatory interest. And you must be the human who's turned my son's head. Pretty little thing. I can see the appeal. Her name is Lily, Cade said, his voice carrying a warning. And she's under my protection. Your protection. Marcus laughed, the sound harsh in the mountain air. What protection can a lone wolf offer? You're outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and frankly out of your depth. Try me. Oh, I intend to. Marcus's expression shifted, becoming coldly calculating. Here's what's going to happen, Cade. You're going to come home where you belong. You're going to take your rightful place as my heir and future alpha of this pack. And your little human pet is going to disappear. Over my dead body. That can be arranged, Marcus said pleasantly. But I'd prefer not to kill my only son. So let me make you a different offer. He gestured, and 2 more wolves stepped into the clearing. These were in human form, but Lily could sense their barely leashed power, the predatory stillness that marked them as dangerous. Single combat, Marcus continued. You and me, wolf to wolf, like the old ways. If you win, you and your mate walk away, and I'll call off the hunt permanently. And if you win? When I win, you come home, take your place in the pack, and we'll make your human's death quick and painless. Lily felt ice form in her veins. Wait just a damn minute. No, Cade said firmly, his hand on her arm. He's not talking to you. He's talking to me. This is pack business. I'm pack 2 now, remember? She glared at him. And I have something to say about people planning my murder. Marcus laughed again. Spirit. I like that. It's almost a shame she has to die. She doesn't have to die, Cade said, his voice deadly quiet. None of this has to happen. Just walk away, Dad. Let us live our lives in peace. Peace? Marcus spat in the snow. You think hiding up here in the mountains is peace? You think pretending to be human is peace? You're alpha blood, Cade. You were born to lead, to dominate, to take what you want by force. I was born to protect, Cade corrected. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. The change came over him so quickly that Lily barely saw it. One moment he was human, the next he was the massive black wolf she'd first encountered. But this was different from his previous transformations. This wolf radiated power and authority, every line of his body screaming alpha dominance. Marcus smiled and shifted as well, his wolf form slightly larger than Cade's, silver-touched and scarred from decades of battles. Finally, the older wolf seemed to say, though of course no words came from his lupine throat. What followed was brutal and beautiful and terrifying all at once. The two wolves circled each other with deadly grace, testing, feinting, looking for weaknesses. When they finally clashed, it was with a violence that shook the ground and sent snow flying. Through her bond with Cade, Lily could feel every impact, every tearing claw and snapping tooth. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. Her entire being focused on the battle playing out in front of her. Marcus was older, more experienced, scarred by countless dominance fights. But Cade was younger, faster, and fighting for something more important than pack hierarchy. He was fighting for love. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Both wolves were bleeding, both showing signs of exhaustion, but neither was backing down. Through their bond, Lily could feel Cade's determination, his absolute refusal to let anything happen to her. That's when she noticed the other pack members moving, positioning themselves to strike if their alpha fell. They weren't going to honor the terms of single combat. They were planning to overwhelm Cade no matter who won. "Shadow," she whispered, and the wolf beside her tensed, his ears swiveling toward the threats she'd spotted. The end came suddenly. Marcus, thinking he had Cade pinned, went for the killing bite to the throat, but Cade twisted at the last second, using his father's momentum against him, and his jaws closed around the older wolf's neck instead. For a moment, everything was still. Marcus went, limp, his golden eyes wide with surprise and what might have been pride. Then the rest of the pack attacked. "Now!" Lily shouted, and Shadow exploded into motion, intercepting the first attacker before it could reach Cade. But there were too many of them, and Cade was injured from his fight with Marcus. Without thinking, without planning, without any consideration for her own safety, Lily ran into the middle of the melee. "Stop!" she screamed, and something in her voice, some authority she didn't know she possessed, made every wolf in the clearing freeze. She could feel it then, flowing through her bond with Cade and out into the world. Pack magic, alpha dominance, the absolute authority to command. "I am Lily Morrison," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the mountain air. "Mate to Cade Morrison, alpha of the Blackstone Pack, by right of combat, and I say this ends now." The wolves stared at her, confused and uncertain. She was human, but she carried the scent and authority of Pack Alpha. She was prey, but she commanded them like a predator. "Anyone who wants to challenge my mate's claim," she continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "can do it properly. Single combat, honorably fought, but this ambush, this coward's attack, ends now." One by one, the wolves backed down, lowering their heads in submission. Even in their lupine forms, she could see their acknowledgement of her authority. Cade, still in wolf form but no longer fighting, padded over to her and pressed against her legs. Through their bond, she felt his amazement, his love, and his fierce pride in his mate. "Good," she said, her hand finding his fur. "Now I believe my husband has something to say to his pack." Chapter 11. The new dawn, Cade shifted back to human form slowly, his body bearing the wounds of battle, but his posture radiating the unmistakable authority of an alpha who had proven himself in combat. When he spoke, his voice carried across the clearing with quiet command. "Marcus Morrison is dead," he said simply. "Killed in honorable single combat, witnessed by pack and mate alike. By blood right and battle right, I claim leadership of the Blackstone Pack." The wolves who had been Marcus's followers were still in lupine form, but Lily could sense their confusion and uncertainty through the strange new awareness her mating bond had awakened. They had followed Marcus for decades, but the law of the pack was clear. The strongest led, and Cade had proven himself stronger. One by one, they shifted back to human form. Lily recognized some of them from her brief glimpse during the attack. Hard-faced men and women with the lean builds and watchful eyes of predators. But now, faced with their new alpha, she saw something else in their expressions. Hope. "What are your orders, Alpha?" asked one of them, a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair and scars across her cheek. Cade looked at Marcus's body, and Lily felt a complex tangle of emotions through their bond. Grief for the father who had loved him in his own twisted way, relief that the threat was over, and a heavy sense of responsibility for the pack he had never wanted to lead. "First, we honor the dead," he said finally. "Marcus Morrison was a flawed alpha, but he was pack. He deserves a proper burial." The woman nodded approvingly, and Lily sensed that this was the right answer, the one that showed Cade understood pack law and tradition, even if he had rejected them for years. "Second," Cade continued, "things are going to change. We're not raiders or conquerors anymore. We're guardians. We protect the territory and the humans who live in it, not prey on them." There was some shifting and muttering at this, but no outright challenges. Lily could feel their uncertainty, their ingrained habits warring with their acceptance of new leadership. "And third," Cade's voice grew warmer as his eyes found Lily's, "you will show proper respect to my mate, your alpha female. She may be human, but she has pack authority, and anyone who challenges that challenges me." "She commands wolves," said one of the younger men, his voice filled with wonder. I felt it. She's human, but she has the voice. Lily had no idea what the voice was, but from the murmurs of amazement around the clearing, it was apparently something significant. "My mate is many things," Cade said, pride clear in his voice. "And you'll have time to learn what that means for all of us. But for now, we have work to do." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Marcus was buried according to pack tradition, in a grave deep in the forest where the wolves could visit his resting place in either form. The other pack members gathered what belongings they could carry and began the process of relocating to the territory around Cade's cabin. "There are caves higher up the mountain," explained the scarred woman who had introduced herself as Elena, Marcus's former beta. "We can make temporary shelters there until we build something more permanent." "You're staying?" Lily asked, surprised. She'd assumed the pack would scatter once their alpha was dead. Elena looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You called the alpha challenge human. You understood pack law well enough to save all our lives. Where would we go?" It was a fair point. Without a pack, lone wolves rarely survived long in the wild. And despite Marcus's harsh methods, these people were family to each other in the way that only pack could be. "Besides," Elena continued with a slight smile, "it's been a long time since we had an alpha worth following. Most of us are curious to see what Cade Morrison will do with the power he never wanted." As the sun set on their first day as the new pack leaders, Lily found herself sitting by the fireplace with Cade's head in her lap, her fingers gently combing through his dark hair. Shadow was sprawled across their feet as usual, and she could hear the sounds of the pack settling in for the night. Voices talking quietly, the rustle of makeshift shelters, the soft patting of paws as some members chose to sleep in wolf form. "Regrets?" Cade asked softly, his golden eyes reflecting the firelight. Lily thought about it honestly. A week ago, she'd been a runaway bride hiding from her problems. Now she was the mate of a werewolf alpha, responsible for the safety and well-being of a pack she barely knew. It was terrifying and overwhelming and completely insane. "None," she said firmly. "Not one." even though your quiet mountain life just became a lot more complicated?" She laughed. "Cade, my life was complicated the moment I decided to save an injured wolf in a snowstorm. Everything since then has just been consequences." "Good consequences? The best consequences?" She leaned down to kiss his forehead. "I love you, Alpha Morrison. All of you. The man, the wolf, and the leader you never wanted to be. And I love you, my fierce mate who commands wolves and faces down pack hunters without blinking." His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "My salvation, my strength, my home." Through the window, Lily could see the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there was her old life, her job, her apartment, her family who thought she'd disappeared. But that life belonged to someone else now, someone who had been afraid to take risks, afraid to trust her instincts, afraid to demand the love she deserved. This life, impossible and dangerous and beautiful, belonged to her. To Lily Morrison, alpha female of the Blackstone Pack, mate to the wolf who had shown her what it meant to be truly known. "What happens now?" she asked, the question that seemed to define every turning point in her new existence. "Now we build something new," Cade said, his voice full of quiet determination. "A pack based on protection instead of predation, on love instead of fear. A family that chooses each other instead of being bound by accident of birth. Think it'll work? With you beside me? I think we can do anything." From somewhere outside came the sound of a wolf howling, not a hunting call or a challenge, but something softer, more melodic. A song of contentment, of pack bonds and full bellies and safety in numbers. It was answered by another voice, then another, until the mountain air was filled with the music of family. Lily had spent most of her life feeling like she didn't quite fit anywhere, like she was always performing a role that didn't suit her. But as she sat in the firelight with her mate's head in her lap and the voices of their pack echoing through the night, she finally understood what home was supposed to feel like. It wasn't a place. It was belonging. It was being known, completely and utterly, and loved anyway. It was finding your pack and deciding to protect them with everything you had. She was home. Epilogue. Forever Wild. 6 months later, the cabin had grown. What started as Cade's simple retreat had evolved into the heart of a small community, with additional structures built to house the pack members who had chosen to make their home in human form. Others preferred the caves higher up the mountain, living wild and free, but they all gathered here for meals and meetings and the important moments that bound them together as family. Lily had grown too. The uncertain woman who had fled her wedding was gone, replaced by someone who moved through the world with quiet confidence and barely leashed power. She'd learned to track and hunt, to understand the complex social dynamics of pack hierarchy, and to use the mysterious voice that allowed her to command wolves despite her human nature. "It's rare," Elena had explained during one of their training sessions. "Maybe one human in a million can speak to our wolves directly. It's why the old legends talk about human witches who could control shapeshifters." "I'm not a witch," Lily had protested. "Aren't you?" Elena had smiled. "You worked magic on our alpha, didn't you? Made him believe in love again, made him want to lead instead of run. If that's not witchcraft, I don't know what is." Now, as Lily sat in the morning sunshine outside the expanded cabin, she could feel the contentment of her pack through the bonds that connected them all. Cade was leading a patrol through the Southern Territory, checking for signs of rogue wolves or other threats. Shadow was napping in a patch of sunlight, his injury from that first night nothing but a memory. Elena was teaching the younger pack members about medicinal herbs, her voice carrying on the mountain breeze. It was a good life. A wild life, lived on the edges of human civilization, but richer and more meaningful than anything she had known before. "Lily!" called one of the younger wolves, a girl named Sarah who had joined the pack just a month ago, fleeing an abusive situation in the lowlands. "There's someone coming up the road." Lily felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. Visitors were rare and usually meant trouble of one kind or another. She stood, brushing dirt from her jeans, and walked to where she could see down the mountain road. It was a small, practical sedan, making its way slowly up the winding track. As it got closer, Lily's heart began to pound with recognition. The car that pulled up in front of the cabin was a rental, but the woman who got out was unmistakably familiar. Emma Chen looked exactly the same as she had 6 months ago. Neat blonde bob, sensible clothes, worried expression. But when her eyes found Lily's, the worry transformed into relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. "Hi, Em," Lily said softly. "Hi, yourself." Emma's voice was shaky with emotion. "You look good, really good." It was true. Lily had gained muscle from her active lifestyle, and her skin had taken on a healthy glow from all the time spent outdoors. But more than that, she moved differently now, with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. "You found me," Lily said, stepping forward but stopping when Emma took an involuntary step back. It was subtle, but Lily's enhanced senses caught it. The way Emma's pulse spiked, the slight widening of her pupils, the unconscious tilt of her head that exposed her throat. Her sister was reacting to her on a primal level, recognizing her as a predator even though Lily was still fully human. "I hired a private investigator," Emma admitted. "I needed to know you were safe." "And now you know." "Do I?" Emma's voice was carefully controlled. "Lily, there are things about this place, about you. I can feel something, but I don't understand what." Before Lily could answer, she felt Cade's presence through their bond. He was returning from patrol, along with Shadow and 2 other pack members. She could sense his tension as he detected an unfamiliar scent in their territory. "My husband's coming," she said simply. "Try not to be afraid." "Husband?" Emma's eyes went wide. "Lily, you've been gone 6 months. When did you—" She broke off as Cade appeared at the tree line, still in human form, but moving with that fluid grace that marked him as other. Shadow padded beside him, and Emma's sharp intake of breath told Lily she'd recognized the massive wolf. "That's him," Emma whispered. "That's the wolf from the news reports, the one they said attacked Marcus." "He didn't attack Marcus," Lily said calmly. "He defended our family." Cade approached slowly, his golden eyes fixed on Emma with careful assessment. When he reached Lily's side, he wrapped one arm around her waist in a gesture that was both affectionate and possessive. "Emma," Lily said, "this is my husband, Cade Morrison." "Cade, this is my sister." Miss Chen Cade's voice was polite, but guarded. "Lily's told me a lot about you." Emma stared at him, and Lily could practically see her trying to reconcile this calm, controlled man with the wild stories she'd undoubtedly heard. "You're the one who disappeared with my sister," she said finally. "I'm the one who gave her a home when she needed one," Cade corrected gently. "Just as she gave me one when I needed it." "This is crazy," Emma said, her composure finally cracking. "Lily, you can't just disappear into the mountains with some stranger and call it marriage. What about your life? Your career? Your future?" "This is my future," Lily said firmly. "This is my life, my family, my choice." "But you could have anything," Emma pressed. "You're smart, talented, beautiful. You could rebuild, start over, find someone normal." "Normal like Marcus?" The words came out sharper than Lily intended. "Normal like a man who cheated on me for 2 years while I planned our wedding?" Emma flinched. "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" Lily studied her sister's face. "Em, I love you." You're my family and you always will be. But I'm not the same person who ran away from that wedding. I'm stronger now, happier now. I've found where I belong." With him, Emma's eyes flicked to Cade, and Lily saw the fear there. With them? She gestured toward the other pack members who had quietly gathered at the edges of the clearing, drawn by the presence of an outsider. "Yes," Lily said simply. "With all of them." Emma was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving from Lily to Cade to the wolves who watched from the shadows. Finally, she sighed. "I can see that you're happy," she said quietly. "I don't understand it, but I can see it. You're radiant in a way I've never seen before." "Thank you for coming to check on me," Lily said, meaning it. "It means everything that you cared enough to find me." "Will I see you again?" Lily looked at Cade, who nodded slightly. "If you want to. You're always welcome here, Em. You're pack now by extension." "Pack?" "Family," Cade clarified. "The people we protect, the people who matter." Emma nodded slowly, though Lily could see she was still processing everything she'd learned. "I should go," Emma said finally. "I have a flight back to Seattle tonight." "Drive safely," Lily said, hugging her sister tightly. "And Em? Don't worry about me anymore. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." They watched Emma's car disappear down the mountain road, and then Cade turned to Lily with questioning eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm perfect," she said, and meant it. She needed to see that I'm safe and happy. Now she knows. And if she tells people about us? Lily smiled, the expression fierce and wild. Then they'll know that there are still places in this world where magic lives, where love conquers fear, and where a runaway bride can become the queen of wolves. Cade laughed, the sound rich with joy and promise. "My queen of wolves," he said, pulling her close. "My wild, impossible, perfect mate." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lily felt the contentment of her pack flowing through the bonds that connected them all. This was her kingdom, not buildings and walls, but hearts and souls and the fierce loyalty of family, chosen rather than born. She had found her happily ever after in the last place she would have looked for it. And it was more beautiful than any fairy tale she had ever imagined.